He told me I was too old to deserve my own space. I smiled and nodded, but what I did 3 weeks later left my entire family in shock. I'm so glad you're here with me today. Stay until the very end of my story and comment which country you're watching from, so I can see how far my message has traveled. I never imagined that at 70 years old, I'd feel like a stranger in my own home. But that's exactly what happened after my son moved his girlfriend into the house I'd lived in for 43 years. My name is Dorothy Eleanor Hayes, and this is the story of how I lost my home to my own son's greed, and how I took back my dignity in a way that shocked everyone who thought I was just a helpless old woman. Let me start from the beginning, because understanding how I got here requires knowing who I was before everything changed. I've lived in Maplewood Heights, a quiet suburb of Portland, for most of my adult life. The house, a modest 3-bedroom Cape Cod with blue shutters and a wraparound porch, sits on Elmwood Drive, a tree-lined street where neighbors still wave to each other, and children ride their bikes until the streetlights come on. I bought this house with my late husband, Richard Hayes, back in 1982, when mortgage rates were astronomical, and we had to save every penny to make the down payment. Richard was an electrical engineer, a quiet man with gentle hands and a brilliant mind. He could fix anything: plumbing, electrical wiring, even our old Chrysler that constantly broke down. He built the deck in our backyard by himself, spending every weekend for an entire summer, measuring, sawing, and hammering until it was perfect. That deck was where we celebrated Marcus's high school graduation, where we hosted neighborhood barbecues, where Richard and I would sit on summer evenings watching fireflies and talking about our dreams. Richard died of a massive heart attack in 1997, when he was only 54 years old. He collapsed in the garage while working on that same old Chrysler. Our son Marcus, who was 12 at the time, was the one who found him. I can still remember Marcus's screams echoing through the house, the way my whole world tilted on its axis in that single terrible moment. After Richard died, I had to become both mother and father to Marcus. I worked 2 jobs, receptionist at Riverside Medical Center during the day, and weekend shifts at Henderson's department store to keep us afloat. The life insurance helped, but it wasn't enough to maintain our standard of living. I learned to do the repairs Richard used to handle. I taught myself basic plumbing when the kitchen sink leaked. I watched YouTube videos to figure out how to replace electrical outlets. I mowed the lawn every Saturday, even when my back ached and my hands blistered. But I never considered selling the house. This was our home, filled with Richard's presence in every corner. His tools still hung in the garage, organized exactly the way he liked them. His favorite coffee mug, the one with "World's Best Dad" that Marcus had given him for Father's Day, still sat in the kitchen cabinet. His winter coat still hung by the back door, and sometimes, late at night, I'd press my face against it and swear I could still smell his cologne. I raised Marcus in this house. I packed his school lunches at the kitchen counter every morning for 12 years. I helped him with homework at the dining room table. I sat in the audience at Jefferson High School and watched him graduate valedictorian. I drove him to Portland State University for his first day of college, crying the whole way home because the house felt so empty without him. Marcus was a good student, driven and ambitious. He majored in business administration and graduated with honors. He got a job right out of college with Cascade Pharmaceuticals as a junior sales representative, and within 8 years, he'd worked his way up to regional sales manager. He moved to downtown Portland, into a sleek apartment building with a doorman and a view of the Willamette River. Our relationship changed after he moved out. The boy who used to call me every Sunday became a man who texted occasionally and visited on major holidays. He was busy, he said. Important meetings, client dinners, work travel. I understood, or at least I tried to. He was building his career, building his life. That's what children are supposed to do, right? They're supposed to grow up and leave. But I never stopped being his mother. I never stopped loving him with that fierce, unconditional love that makes you willing to sacrifice anything for your child's happiness. That love is what made me blind to what was coming. 6 months ago, in early April, Marcus called me on a Tuesday evening. It was unusual. He typically only called on Sundays, if at all.
That meeting came 2 weeks later, when Marcus brought Sienna to Sunday dinner. I'd spent all day preparing: pot roast with roasted vegetables, Marcus's favorite since childhood, and apple pie for dessert, using Richard's mother's recipe. I cleaned the house top to bottom, put fresh flowers on the dining table, and changed into my nicest dress. When the doorbell rang at exactly 5 p.m., I rushed to answer it, my heart fluttering with nervous excitement. Sienna Caldwell was stunning. She stood on my porch in a white silk blouse and tailored black pants that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Her platinum blonde hair fell in perfect waves past her shoulders, and her makeup was flawless, the kind of sophisticated look you see in magazines. She wore expensive-looking jewelry, diamond studs in her ears, and a delicate gold necklace, and carried a designer handbag that I recognized from advertisements as costing several $1,000s. "Mrs. Hayes," she said, extending a perfectly manicured hand, "it's so lovely to finally meet you. Marcus has told me so much about you." Her smile was bright and practiced, the kind of smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. But I ignored that small warning bell in the back of my mind. I was determined to like her, to welcome her into our family. "Please, call me Dorothy," I said, ushering them inside. Come in, dinner's almost ready." As Sienna walked through my living room, I watched her eyes scan everything: the floral-patterned couch that Richard and I had bought at a furniture sale in 1995, the braided rug my mother had made, the collection of family photos on the mantel, and the cross-stitch samplers I'd framed and hung on the walls. "What a charming home," she said, and something in her tone made those words feel less like a compliment and more like polite condescension. Very homey, very lived in. Marcus seemed oblivious to the subtle slight. He said, "Nothing's really changed since I was a kid. Mom likes to keep things the way they were." "There's something to be said for tradition," Sienna replied, settling delicately on the edge of the couch as if afraid it might soil her expensive clothes. "Though I must say I'm much more of a modernist myself. I believe spaces should evolve with the times." Dinner was awkward. Sienna picked at her food, eating tiny bites and commenting that she was mostly plant-based these days, and that red meat made her feel sluggish. She asked for the wine list before apparently remembering that this wasn't a restaurant, then laughed at her own silly mistake. She checked her phone 3 times during the meal, apologizing each time by saying she was waiting for an important email from a client. But the worst moment came when she noticed the photos on my dining room wall, a gallery of family pictures spanning decades. There was one of Richard and I on our wedding day, young and in love, one of Marcus as a baby, chubby-cheeked and grinning, one of all 3 of us at Cannon Beach, Marcus, maybe 7 years old, building a sandcastle. "Is that Marcus's father?" Sienna asked, pointing at Richard with her fork. "Yes," I said softly. "My husband, Richard. He passed away 28 years ago." "Oh, right. Marcus mentioned that." She tilted her head, studying the photo. "You've kept all these old pictures up. That's sweet, though it must make it hard to move forward, being surrounded by the past like this." The comment landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples of discomfort through the room. Marcus shifted in his seat, but said nothing. "The past is part of who we are," I said quietly. "Richard built this house with his own hands. These photos remind me of the life we built together, the family we created. I don't want to forget that." "Of course not," Sienna said quickly, her tone suggesting she thought the opposite. "It's just that sometimes holding on to things too tightly can prevent us from embracing new experiences, new relationships." She reached over and squeezed Marcus's hand. "New futures." After they left that evening, I stood in my kitchen washing dishes and trying to shake the uncomfortable feeling that had settled over me. Something about Sienna felt off,
but I couldn't quite pinpoint it. Maybe I was just being an overprotective mother, suspicious of any woman who wanted to take my son away. Maybe I was jealous that someone else was now the most important woman in Marcus's life. I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. Marcus loved her, and that should be enough. That decision would prove to be a mistake. 2 weeks after that first dinner, Marcus called again. This time, his tone was different, hesitant, almost nervous. "Mom, I need to ask you for a favor." "Of course, sweetheart. What do you need?" There was a pause, and I could hear him taking a breath. Sienna's lease is up at the end of the month. Her apartment building's being converted to condos, and she'd have to buy or move out. And I've been thinking, we've been together for 4 months now, and things are really serious. We're talking about getting engaged, maybe getting married next year. My heart swelled with happiness for him. "Marcus, that's wonderful news." "Yeah, it is. But here's the thing. We're trying to save money for a wedding and eventually a house of our own. Sienna's rent is $2,400 a month, and my lease doesn't end for another 8 months. We were thinking maybe we could stay with you for a while, just temporarily, until we can find a place together and save up for a down payment."
I didn't even hesitate. "Of course you can stay here. You can have your old room. I'd love to have you home, Marcus, and it'll give me a chance to get to know Sienna better." "You're the best, Mom, really. We'll only be there for a few months, I promise. Maybe 3 or 4, just until we figure things out." "Stay as long as you need," I said, already mentally preparing Marcus's old bedroom for their arrival. "This is your home, too." Looking back now, I can see how naive I was, how desperately I wanted to believe that this was a chance to reconnect with my son, to be part of his life again, to not feel so crushingly alone in this big house full of memories. I should have been more careful. I should have set boundaries, established clear expectations, protected myself. But I was a mother who loved her son, and mothers make terrible decisions when it comes to their children's happiness. They moved in on the last Saturday of May. I'd spent the entire week preparing, cleaning Marcus's old bedroom until it sparkled, clearing out closet space, buying groceries and toiletries I thought they might need. I put fresh sheets on the bed, placed new towels in the bathroom, and even bought a small vase of fresh flowers for the dresser. When they arrived, Sienna stepped out of Marcus's BMW carrying a Starbucks coffee cup and wearing yoga pants that probably cost $200. Behind them, a moving truck sat idling in the driveway. "You hired movers?" I asked, surprised. "For just a few boxes?" "Sienna has a lot of things," Marcus explained, already looking stressed. "She's very particular about her belongings." Very particular turned out to be an understatement. Over the next 3 hours, I watched as movers hauled in suitcase after suitcase, box after box, container after container. Designer clothes, shoes organized in clear plastic boxes, beauty products that filled an entire storage cart, exercise equipment, kitchen gadgets, decorative items. "Where are we supposed to put all this?" Marcus asked, looking overwhelmed as the guest room filled to capacity. "Well," Sienna said, looking around my house with a critical eye, "we'll need to make some space. Dorothy, you wouldn't mind if we used the hall closet too, would you? And maybe some room in the garage." "Of course," I said, though I was already feeling crowded in my own home. "Whatever you need." That evening, after the movers left and Marcus went to pick up dinner, Sienna and I were alone in the kitchen. She was looking through my cabinets with barely concealed disapproval. "Dorothy, do you mind if I rearrange some of these kitchen items?" she asked, already moving my mixing bowls to a different shelf. "I have a very specific system for organizing, and it helps me feel more at home." "This is how I've had things organized for 40 years, I said carefully. "Exactly," Sienna replied, not looking at me as she continued rearranging. "Sometimes change is good. You might find you like a new system better." I wanted to object, to tell her that this was my kitchen and she was a guest, but I bit my tongue. They'd only just arrived. I didn't want to start their stay with conflict. That was my second mistake. The first week was manageable, though not comfortable.
Sienna and Marcus kept mostly to themselves, which meant I ended up feeling like a stranger in my own home, tiptoeing around to avoid disturbing them. But small changes began appearing immediately. On the second day, I came downstairs to find that my decorative pillows, the ones I'd cross-stitched myself with patterns of birds and flowers, had been removed from the living room couch and replaced with sleek gray ones that Sienna had ordered online. "They're more modern," she explained when I asked about my pillows. "Your old ones are in the garage. You can keep them if you want, but honestly, Dorothy, they made the room look cluttered and outdated." On the third day, the family photos that had hung in the hallway for decades were taken down. "The frames are all mismatched," Sienna said, stacking them in a box. "It looks messy. I ordered some matching frames and we can put up a more cohesive gallery wall. Maybe some abstract art or landscape photos instead of all these old family pictures." "Those are memories," I protested weakly. "That's my family. And they'll still be your family when they're in a photo album instead of taking up all the wall space. We're all living here together now, Dorothy. We need to make the space feel comfortable for everyone, not just you." Marcus nodded along, and I felt my protest die in my throat. By the end of the first week, my living room looked nothing like it had before. The throw blankets my mother had crocheted were folded away. The coffee table books about gardening and local history were replaced with glossy fashion magazines. Even the scent of my home changed. Sienna burned expensive candles that smelled like eucalyptus mint and made my nose itch. But I told myself to be flexible. They were trying to feel at home. I could adapt. The second week brought new challenges. Sienna complained about the water pressure in the shower. She didn't like that there was only one bathroom and she had to share it with me. She needed counter space for her extensive skincare routine. "I have a 10-step system, Dorothy. It's essential," which meant my toothbrush and simple drugstore moisturizer were relegated to a small corner of the vanity. She complained about my cooking. "Do you use a lot of salt? I'm watching my sodium intake. And butter? Do you use butter? I really need to stick to olive oil." I started modifying my recipes to accommodate her preferences, which meant my food tasted bland and unfamiliar to me.
She complained about the thermostat. "It's too warm in here, Dorothy. I need it cooler at night to sleep properly." Never mind that I got cold easily and had been comfortable at 72 degrees for 4 decades. By the third week, I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells, afraid to touch anything or do anything that might invite criticism or complaint. And Marcus said nothing. Whenever I tried to talk to him, tried to explain that some of Sienna's requests were making me uncomfortable, he'd get defensive. "She's just trying to feel at home, Mom. Can't you be a little more flexible? You have this whole house, and we're crammed into one bedroom. The least you can do is compromise on some small things." Small things. That's what he called the systematic erasure of my presence in my own home. But the real crisis came on a Sunday evening in mid-June, 6 weeks after they'd moved in. We were having dinner. Chicken stir-fry that I'd made with olive oil instead of butter, with minimal salt, exactly how Sienna liked it. The conversation had been stilted, mostly Sienna talking about a difficult client, while Marcus listened attentively, and I sat in silence, feeling like a third wheel in my own dining room. Then Sienna set down her fork with a decisive clink and looked at me with that practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Dorothy, Marcus and I have been talking, and we need to discuss something important about our living situation." My stomach tightened. "Are you moving out? Have you found an apartment?" "Not exactly," Sienna said, exchanging a glance with Marcus. "Actually, we've realized that this arrangement isn't quite working for us the way we'd hoped." I felt a flutter of relief. Maybe they'd decided to get their own place after all. I understand. It must be difficult, sharing such a small space. "That's exactly the issue," Sienna continued. "The guest room is fine for sleeping, but Marcus and I are both working from home several days a week now, and we don't have adequate space for home offices. We need room to grow, to plan our future together, to prepare for our wedding next spring. I could clear out some space in the garage."
Marcus, your father's workbench is still out there, but that's not what we're thinking, Marcus interrupted, and his tone made my blood run cold. Mom, we need to talk about the bedrooms. The bedrooms. My bedroom. What about the bedrooms? I asked, though I already knew where this was going. Sienna leaned forward, her expression carefully arranged in sympathetic concern. Dorothy, Marcus and I have been talking, and we need to discuss something important about our living situation. My bedroom? I have slept in that room for 43 years. We know that, Marcus said gently, as if he were breaking difficult news to a child. But, Mom, you're one person. You don't really need all that space. Sienna and I are a couple trying to build a life together. We need room for both of our belongings, space to work, privacy to plan our future. You want me to give you my bedroom? We'd like you to consider moving to the guest room, Sienna said, her voice honey-sweet but with steel underneath. It's a perfectly nice room, Dorothy. Smaller, yes, but adequate for one person. And honestly, at your age, you don't need as much space as you used to. You're retired. You don't work from home. You don't need a large closet for work clothes. The guest room would be perfect for your needs. My needs? I repeated, feeling anger start to kindle in my chest. My needs are to live in my own bedroom in my own home. It's not just your house anymore, Mom, Marcus said, and there was an edge to his voice now. We're living here too. We're family, and family members make sacrifices for each other. You taught me that. The hypocrisy of his words was staggering. I'd sacrificed everything for him. My youth, my career opportunities, my chances at finding love again after Richard died. And now he was asking me to sacrifice my bedroom so his girlfriend could have a bigger closet? I don't think this is fair, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You asked to stay here temporarily. I welcomed you into my home. I've tried to accommodate all of Sienna's requests and changes, but my bedroom is where I draw the line. Sienna's smile never wavered, but something cold flashed in her eyes. Dorothy, let's be realistic. You're 70 years old. How much longer are you really going to be able to manage this big house on your own? Eventually, you're going to need to downsize, maybe even move into assisted living or a senior community. We're actually helping you prepare for that transition by encouraging you to get comfortable with less space. The words hit me like a physical blow. Assisted living? Senior community? She was talking about me like I was one step away from a nursing home. I'm 70, not 90. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself and my home. No one's saying you're not capable, Marcus said quickly, shooting Sienna a warning look that she ignored. We're just trying to make this situation work for everyone. The master bedroom would really help us feel more settled here.
More settled? I stood up from the table, my hands trembling. You said you'd be here for 3 or 4 months? Now you're talking about weddings and being settled and treating me like I'm a burden in my own home. Dorothy, please don't be dramatic, Sienna sighed. We're having an adult conversation about practical living arrangements. If you can't discuss this rationally, get out, I said quietly. They both stared at me. What? Marcus asked. Get out of my house, I repeated, louder this time. Both of you, right now. Marcus's face went red. Mom, come on, don't be like this. Be like what? Be upset that my own son is trying to take my bedroom away? Be hurt that you've let your girlfriend disrespect me in my own home? Be angry that you think so little of me that you'd ask me to give up my space, my privacy, my comfort, so you can feel settled? See? Sienna said to Marcus, as if I weren't standing right there. "This is exactly what I was worried about. She's too set in her ways to compromise. She can't see beyond her own needs." Something snapped inside me. For 6 weeks, I'd bitten my tongue, swallowed my complaints, let them erase my presence from my own home. But this was too much. My needs? I was shouting now, my voice cracking with emotion. "I have given you everything, Marcus. Everything. I worked myself to exhaustion to raise you after your father died. I sacrificed relationships, opportunities, my own happiness to make sure you had everything you needed. And this is how you repay me? By treating me like an inconvenience? By making me feel unwelcome in my own home?" Marcus looked stricken, but Sienna just looked annoyed. This is exactly why multi-generational living rarely works. There's too much emotional baggage. "Then leave," I said coldly. "Take your baggage and go." "We're not leaving," Marcus said firmly, his shock giving way to stubborn anger. "We have nowhere else to go right now, and you said we could stay. You can't just kick us out because we asked you for one thing." "One thing?" I laughed bitterly. "You've changed everything about this house. You've erased my presence bit by bit, and now you want the one space I have left that's mine. That's not one thing, Marcus. That's everything." We stood there in tense silence, the dinner growing cold on the table between us. Finally, Sienna stood up, smoothing her designer blouse with exaggerated patience. "Fine. We'll table this discussion for now. But Dorothy, you need to understand that this living situation can't continue the way it has been. Something needs to change. And frankly, you're the one being inflexible here." She walked out of the dining room, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. A moment later, I heard the guest room door close firmly. Marcus lingered, looking torn. "Mom, "Go to bed, Marcus," I said wearily, all the fight draining out of me. "Just go." He opened his mouth as if to say something else, then closed it and followed Sienna upstairs. I stood alone in my dining room, surrounded by the house Richard and I had built, now feeling like a stranger in it. I looked at the empty walls where my family photos used to hang, at the gray pillows on my couch that weren't mine, at the flickering eucalyptus candle filling my home with someone else's preferred scent. And I realized that Marcus wasn't going to back down. Sienna wasn't going to stop pushing. If I didn't do something drastic, I would slowly lose everything that made this house my home, until I was just an old woman living as a tolerated guest in a space that no longer belonged to her in any meaningful way. That night, I lay in my bed, in my room, and made a decision. If they thought I was too old and powerless to fight back, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with, and that meant doing something I'd never done before. The next morning, after Marcus and Sienna had both left, Marcus to his office, Sienna to meet with a client, I did something that would have shocked the woman I'd been just 2 months ago. I went into their room and I started looking for answers. What I found would change everything. The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains in my bedroom, the bedroom they wanted to take from me, as I sat on the edge of my bed, hands trembling slightly. It was 9:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Marcus had left for the office at 8:30, dressed in his usual crisp suit and tie, barely acknowledging me as he grabbed his coffee and briefcase. Sienna had departed at 9:15, announcing she had back-to-back client meetings and wouldn't be home until dinner time, which meant I was alone in the house. I'd never been the type of mother to snoop through my child's belongings. Even when Marcus was a teenager and other parents talked about checking their kids' rooms for contraband, I'd respected his privacy. Trust was the foundation of our relationship,
or so I'd believed. But trust, I was learning, was a two-way street, and my son had shown me precious little of it lately. I walked slowly down the hallway toward the guest room, Marcus's old bedroom, now temporarily occupied by him and Sienna. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I felt like I was doing something wrong, something shameful. Good mothers don't spy on their children, I told myself. But then I remembered Sienna's cold eyes as she suggested I moved into assisted living. I remembered Marcus's willingness to take my bedroom without a second thought about what it meant to me. I remembered feeling like a stranger in my own home.
The room was a disaster. Clothes were strewn across every surface, Sienna's designer outfits draped over the chair, Marcus's ties hanging from the closet door handle, shoes scattered across the floor. The bed was unmade, expensive silk sheets tangled and hanging halfway off the mattress. The dresser top was covered with Sienna's cosmetics, perfume bottles, and jewelry scattered in no particular order despite her claims of being organized. I stood in the doorway for a moment, taking it all in. This room, where Marcus had done his homework, built model airplanes with his father, dreamed about his future. It looked like a hotel room after a particularly careless guest had checked out. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Evidence of something, anything that might explain why my son had changed so dramatically, why he was treating me with such callous disregard. Maybe I was hoping to find something that would prove Sienna was manipulating him, that the real Marcus, my Marcus, was still in there somewhere, just buried under her influence. I started with the obvious places. The nightstands on either side of the bed revealed nothing particularly interesting. Marcus's contained charging cables, a few books about sales strategies, and a bottle of antacids. Sienna's held expensive hand cream, a sleep mask, and a stack of fashion magazines. The dresser drawers were mostly clothes, though I noticed that Sienna's designer pieces far outnumbered Marcus's more modest wardrobe. I felt a pang of sadness seeing his old University of Portland sweatshirt, the one I'd given him for his 18th birthday, crumpled at the bottom of a drawer beneath Sienna's cashmere sweaters. The closet was packed full. Sienna's clothes took up 3/4 of the space, organized by color and type with a precision that seemed at odds with the chaos of the rest of the room. Marcus's work suits were crammed into one corner, some of them crushed against the wall. I was about to give up and leave, feeling foolish for having invaded their privacy, when I noticed a cardboard file box on the top shelf of the closet, partially hidden behind a stack of Sienna's shoeboxes. Something about it caught my attention. It looked out of place. Plain, brown, unmarked, while everything else in Sienna's collection was designer-labeled and carefully curated. I pulled over the desk chair and climbed up carefully, my knees protesting. My fingers closed around the box, and I lifted it down, surprised by how heavy it was. Setting it on the bed, I lifted the lid. Inside were file folders, neatly organized and labeled. My hands were shaking as I pulled out the first one. The label read, Property Research, Elmwood Drive. My stomach dropped. I opened the folder and found printouts from real estate websites, property value estimates for houses in my neighborhood, comparative market analyses, a detailed breakdown of recent sales on Elmwood Drive and surrounding streets. My address was highlighted in yellow on every single page. The estimated value of my home was circled in red, $675,000. I felt dizzy. Why would they have this information? Why would they be researching the value of my house? The next folder was labeled Portland Senior Living Facilities. Inside were glossy brochures for retirement communities, assisted living centers, and memory care facilities. Brookside Manor, Sunset Hills Retirement Community, Meadowbrook Assisted Living. Each brochure had notes in the margins in handwriting I didn't recognize, probably Sienna's. Starting at $3,200 a month. Wait list 6 to 8 months. Memory care available was underlined on several.
My hands were trembling so badly now that I nearly dropped the folder. They weren't just thinking about me moving out eventually. They were actively researching where to put me. But it was the third folder that made my blood run cold. The label read, Financial Planning. Inside, I found a document that looked like it had been prepared by a financial advisor. It was dated 3 weeks ago, right around the time of our disastrous dinner conversation about the bedroom. The document was titled, Marcus Hayes and Sienna Caldwell, 5-Year Financial Plan. I scanned the pages, my horror growing with each line. Year 1, current residence, mother's house, Elmwood Drive, no rent or mortgage. Combined savings goal, $85,000. Target, house purchase down payment or wedding expenses, revised. Use mother's house proceeds for both. Year 2, mother transitions to senior living facility, estimated cost $3,200 a month, covered by her Social Security plus pension. House sale proceeds, estimated $675,000. After 6% realtor fees and closing costs, $634,500 net proceeds. Marcus as sole heir and beneficiary, full proceeds to Marcus and Sienna. My vision blurred. I read that line again. Marcus as sole heir and beneficiary? They weren't planning to help me move to senior living. They were planning to take my house. To sell my home, the home this father built, the home where we raised him, the home that contained every memory of our family, and use the money for luxury cars and Italian vacations?
And they plan to do it by putting me in a senior living facility. The phrase competency evaluation swam before my eyes. If I didn't cooperate, they would try to have me declared incompetent. They would claim I couldn't take care of myself, that I needed to be in managed care, that I wasn't capable of making my own decisions. I'd watched this happen to my friend Beatrice 2 years ago. Her daughter had gotten power of attorney, claimed Beatrice wasn't managing her finances well, and within 6 months, Beatrice was in a memory care facility, despite being sharp as a tack mentally. Her house was sold, and her daughter bought a vacation home in Scottsdale with the proceeds. Beatrice died 8 months later, heartbroken and defeated. That was what Marcus and Sienna had planned for me. I don't know how long I sat there, the document in my hands, tears running down my face. It felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Eventually, I heard a sound that snapped me out of my shocked grief, a car door slamming outside. I jumped up, panicked. Had one of them come home? I looked at the clock, 10:23 a.m. It was just a neighbor. But the near discovery sent adrenaline coursing through my system. I needed to document this. If I was going to fight back, I needed evidence. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone, a basic smartphone that Marcus had convinced me to get last year so we could text. I'd never been very good with technology, but I knew how to take pictures. I photographed every page of the financial planning document. Then I photographed the property research, the senior living brochures, everything in that box. As I was putting the folders back, I noticed another document at the bottom of the box. It was a legal form, partially filled out. Durable Power of Attorney, State of Oregon. I pulled it out, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold it. The form granted Marcus Hayes full power of attorney over Dorothy Eleanor Hayes, me, for all financial and medical decisions. It was dated for next month, August 15th. There was a sticky note attached in Sienna's handwriting. Get her to sign this after we move into master bedroom. She'll be more compliant once she's already given up ground. If she refuses, Dr. Morrison said he'd be willing to provide competency evaluation. He owes you for the referrals. Dr. Morrison. Dr. Carl Morrison was Marcus's primary care physician. They played golf together. And apparently, Dr. Morrison was willing to falsely evaluate me as incompetent as a favor to my son. I photographed the power of attorney form and the note. Then I carefully put everything back in the box exactly as I'd found it, climbed back up on the chair, and returned the box to its hiding place. My legs nearly gave out as I climbed down. I had to sit on the floor for a moment, my back against the wall, trying to process what I'd discovered. This wasn't just about a bedroom. This wasn't just Sienna being difficult or Marcus being thoughtlessly selfish. This was a calculated plan to take everything from me. I thought about the past 6 weeks with new understanding. The gradual takeover of my home, the criticism, the changes. It had all been designed to make me feel displaced, uncomfortable, unwelcome in my own space. They were trying to make me so miserable that I'd agree to leave. And if I didn't agree, they'd force me out by having me declared incompetent. The request for the master bedroom wasn't about comfort or space. It was a test. If I gave them that, the final piece of my home, I'd be demonstrating that I was weak, that I could be pushed around, that I'd eventually be easy to move into a facility. And once I was in that facility, paying $3,200 a month out of my modest Social Security and pension, they'd sell my house and live off the proceeds. My house was worth $675,000. Richard and I bought it for $87,000 in 1982. We'd paid off the mortgage in 2003, making extra payments whenever we could, sacrificing vacations and luxuries to own our home free and clear. Richard had wanted me to always have security, a place that was truly mine, that no one could take from me. And now his son wanted to steal it. I pulled myself up off the floor, my resolve hardening. I walked back to my bedroom, and sat at the small secretary desk where I paid bills and wrote the occasional letter. I opened my laptop, another piece of technology Marcus had convinced me to get last year so we could text. I'd never been very good with technology, but I knew how to take pictures. I photographed every page of the financial planning document. Then I photographed the property research, the senior living brochures, everything in that box. Then I started researching property law, specifically looking into whether Marcus had any legitimate claim to my house. What I found was clear. Since I owned the house outright, had never added Marcus's name to the deed, and had no loans or liens against the property, it was entirely mine to do with as I pleased. Marcus had no legal claim to it unless I died without a will, and I had a will made shortly after Richard died, leaving everything to Marcus. That will would need to be changed immediately. I was so absorbed in my research that I didn't hear the front door open. I didn't hear footsteps in the hallway. I didn't know anyone was home until Sienna's voice from the doorway made me jump. "Dorothy, what are you doing?" I quickly minimized the browser window on my laptop and turned around, trying to compose my face into a neutral expression. "Just checking my email. I thought you had meetings all day." Sienna was standing in my bedroom doorway, and the fact that she'd just walked in without knocking felt like yet another violation. She was dressed in an elegant cream pantsuit, her makeup perfect, her hair styled in loose waves. "My afternoon meeting canceled," she said, her eyes scanning my room with that critical gaze I'd come to recognize. "I came home to work on some proposals." She stepped further into my room uninvited. "You know, Dorothy, I was thinking about our conversation from the other night. I think we got off on the wrong foot." "Did we?" I kept my voice carefully neutral. "I know change is hard," Sienna said, perching on the edge of my reading chair without being invited to sit. "Especially at your age. But Marcus and I really do have your best interests at heart. At my age, your best interests." The condescension dripped from every word. "I appreciate your concern," I said, each word feeling like broken glass in my mouth. "I'm glad." Sienna smiled that practiced smile.
Because I wanted to talk to you about something. Marcus and I have been discussing it, and we think it might be time to start thinking seriously about your future. My heart was pounding, but I kept my face impassive. My future? Well, yes. You're 70 years old, Dorothy. This house is a lot to maintain. The yard work, the repairs, the cleaning, it must be exhausting for you. And living alone, it's not safe, really. What if you fell? What if you had a medical emergency? I manage just fine, I said. But for how much longer? Sienna leaned forward, her expression arranged in false sympathy. We've been looking into some really lovely senior communities, places where you'd have support, activities, people your own age to socialize with, places where you wouldn't have to worry about home maintenance or yard work or any of those burdens. She was actually doing it. Right now, in my bedroom, she was trying to convince me to give up my home. And what would happen to this house? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Well, Marcus would inherit it eventually anyway, Sienna said, matter-of-factly. But if you moved into a care community now, while you're still healthy enough to enjoy it, the house could be sold to pay for your care. Or, she paused delicately, Marcus could take over the house, and you could have the security of knowing your son was maintaining the family property. Marcus could take over the house, I repeated slowly. While I'm still alive. It would just make sense, Sienna said. You'd sign it over to him, and you'd have the peace of mind knowing it was taken care of. And Marcus and I could make sure you had everything you needed at whichever facility you chose. The audacity of it stole my breath. She wasn't even trying to be subtle anymore. I'll think about it, I said carefully. Sienna's eyes sharpened. There's nothing to think about, really. It's just the practical next step. In fact, Marcus has some paperwork that would make the whole transition easier. Just a simple power of attorney so he could help manage your finances and make sure all your bills are paid and everything is handled properly. A power of attorney, I said, working hard to keep my voice level. It's just a formality, Sienna said. Most people your age have them. It just means that if you ever get confused or can't handle things yourself, Marcus would be able to step in and help. It's really for your protection, Dorothy. For my protection. Right, like a cage protects a bird. I'll think about it, I repeated. Sienna's smile tightened slightly. Well, don't think too long. These things are best handled sooner rather than later. Marcus and I are trying to plan our future, and we need to know what our situation is going to be. She stood up, smoothing her perfect pantsuit. Oh, and Dorothy, I noticed when I was putting away laundry earlier that our room is getting quite cramped. I really think we need to discuss the bedroom situation again soon. This week, preferably. She walked out without waiting for a response, leaving me sitting at my desk, my hands clenched so tightly that my nails were digging into my palms. She'd gone into their room. She might have noticed the box had been moved, the file slightly disturbed, or maybe not. The room had been such chaos that it would be hard to tell if anything had been touched. But the mask had completely dropped now. Sienna wasn't even pretending to be polite or considerate anymore. She was making demands, setting timelines, expecting compliance. I looked at the clock. 11:47 a.m. Marcus wouldn't be home until at least 6 p.m. I had hours. I picked up my phone and called the first estate planning attorney on my list. Whitmore and Associates, this is Jennifer speaking. Hello, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. My name is Dorothy Hayes, and I need to speak with an attorney as soon as possible about protecting my property and changing my will. It's urgent. I can get you in tomorrow afternoon at 2 p.m. with Ms. Whitmore. Would that work? That would be perfect. I hung up and made 2 more calls, scheduling consultations with other attorneys as backup options. Then I called my doctor's office. Not Dr. Morrison, but my own physician, Dr. Sarah Chen, whom I'd been seeing for 15 years. I'd like to schedule a full physical and cognitive evaluation, I told the receptionist, as soon as possible. Is everything all right, Mrs. Hayes? I just want to make sure I'm in good health, and I need documentation of that fact. We can get you in Thursday morning at 9 a.m. for a comprehensive evaluation. Dr. Chen will make sure you're thoroughly checked. 2 more phone calls. One to my bank to schedule a meeting with my personal banker, and one to the Multnomah County Recorder's Office to verify that my deed was properly recorded and there were no liens or encumbrances on my property. By the time I finished making calls, it was nearly 1 p.m. I made myself a sandwich, but couldn't eat more than a few bites. My stomach was churning with anxiety and anger. I went back to my laptop and continued researching. I learned about elder financial abuse, about how common it was for family members to exploit elderly relatives. I learned about the warning signs: isolation, sudden changes in financial arrangements, pressure to sign documents, threats about competency. Marcus and Sienna's plan checked every single box. I also researched something else: how to sell a house quickly in Portland. What I found was interesting. In the current market, houses in good condition, in desirable neighborhoods like Maplewood Heights, were selling fast, often with multiple offers, sometimes in less than a week. An idea was forming in my mind. A terrible, drastic, nuclear option of an idea. If they wanted my house so badly, if they'd built their entire future plan around stealing it from me, what would happen if the house simply wasn't available to steal? What if I sold it myself? The more I thought about it, the more sense it made. This was my house, my property. I could sell it any time I wanted, and there was nothing Marcus could legally do to stop me. Yes, it would mean leaving the home I'd lived in for 43 years, leaving behind the memories of Richard and the life we'd built, but those memories lived in my heart, not in walls and floors. And staying here meant slowly being pushed out anyway, living under their control, possibly ending up in a facility against my will, while they lived in my house and spent my money. At least if I sold the house myself, I'd be making the choice. I'd have control over my own life, and I'd have the proceeds, all $675,000 of them, to build whatever future I wanted. A future that didn't include a son who viewed me as an obstacle to his financial plans. The grief of that realization hit me in waves. This was Marcus, my baby, the child I'd rocked to sleep, helped with homework, cheered for at baseball games, put through college. The young man I'd been so proud of when he got his first job, his first promotion, his first apartment. When had he changed? Or had he always been this person, and I'd simply refused to see it? I thought about Richard, about what he would say if he could see what his son had become. Richard had been such a good man, ethical and kind. He'd worked hard, but never at the expense of others. He taught Marcus to be honest, to treat people with respect, to earn what he had rather than taking what he wanted. Somewhere along the way, those lessons had been forgotten. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Marcus. Sienna said she talked to you about the bedroom situation. Can we discuss this calmly tonight? Please be reasonable, Mom. Be reasonable. As if I was the one being unreasonable by wanting to keep my own bedroom in my own house. I didn't respond. Another text came through, this one from a number I didn't recognize. Hi, Dorothy. This is Sienna. I texted your number from Marcus's phone. I wanted to apologize if I came across too strong earlier. I'm just worried about you. Let's talk tonight over dinner. I'll cook. Heart? The heart emoji made me want to throw my phone across the room. I didn't respond to that one either. Instead, I went back to my research. I looked up real estate agents in Portland, focusing on finding someone with excellent reviews, someone experienced, someone who could move quickly. I found an agent named Patricia Morrison, no relation to the corrupt Dr. Morrison, I hoped. Her reviews were outstanding. Sold my house in 4 days, read one. Got me $50,000 over asking price, another. Professional, fast, and really understood what I needed. I called her office. Morrison Realty, this is Patricia. Hello, my name is Dorothy Hayes. I own a 3-bedroom Cape Cod in Maplewood Heights, and I'm interested in selling quickly. Very quickly. How soon could you come do an evaluation? I could come by tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. if that works for you. That's perfect. Wonderful. Just to give you a preliminary idea, homes in Maplewood Heights are selling very fast right now. If your house is in good condition, we could potentially have you in contract within a week or two. Is there a particular timeline you're working with? I'd like to sell as quickly as possible. There are some family circumstances that make speed important. I understand completely. I've worked with clients in similar situations. We'll get you taken care of, Mrs. Hayes. After I hung up, I sat at my desk feeling both terrified and empowered. This was really happening. I was going to sell my house, my home, the place where I'd planned to live out the rest of my days. But it wasn't really my home anymore, was it? Not when my own son was plotting to steal it from me. Not when I felt like an unwelcome guest in my own space. Better to leave on my own terms than to be forced out on theirs. I spent the rest of the afternoon planning. I opened a separate bank account at a different bank where Marcus's name wasn't listed as beneficiary on my existing accounts. I made lists of what I'd need to do. Update my will, transfer my utilities, start looking for a new place to live. The new place. Where would I go? I started browsing apartment listings. They were nice senior living communities that weren't the assisted living facilities Sienna had been researching. Places where independent seniors lived in their own apartments with optional services available. Places that looked comfortable and safe with other people around.
Or maybe I'd just get a regular apartment, a small 1-bedroom where I could live simply, where I could breathe without feeling judged or pressured, where I could decorate with my own cross-stitch samplers and family photos and crocheted blankets. I was looking at a particularly nice apartment building in the Beaumont, Wilshire neighborhood when I heard Marcus's car in the driveway. It was only 5:30. He was home early. I quickly closed my laptop and tried to compose myself. When the front door opened, I heard 2 voices, Marcus and Sienna, talking in low tones. "Just be gentle about it," Sienna was saying. "She's being stubborn, but she'll come around." "I don't know," Marcus replied, sounding stressed. "She seemed really upset the other night. Maybe we're pushing too hard." "That's just resistance to change. It's normal for people her age, but she'll see reason once she understands we're doing this for her own good." For my own good. How many terrible things had been done throughout history under that justification? I walked out of my bedroom and down the stairs. They were in the kitchen, Sienna pulling ingredients from the refrigerator, my food that I'd bought with my money, while Marcus loosened his tie. "Oh, Mom," Marcus said when he saw me, his smile uncertain. "We're making dinner tonight. Sienna wanted to make her famous chicken piccata." "How nice," I said neutrally. Sienna turned from the counter, her smile bright but her eyes calculating. "I thought we could have a nice family dinner and talk about everything calmly. Clear the air, make some decisions together." "What decisions?" I asked. "About the future," Sienna said easily, as if this were a perfectly normal conversation. "About what makes sense for everyone. I know change is scary, Dorothy, but sometimes it's necessary." Marcus looked uncomfortable. "Mom, we're not trying to pressure you. We just want what's best." "Best for who?" I asked quietly. "For everyone," Sienna answered before Marcus. "For you, so you're not burdened with this big house. For Marcus and me, so we can start building our life together. It's about family taking care of each other." I looked at my son, standing there in my kitchen, in the house his father built, allowing his girlfriend to talk about taking it from me, as if it were perfectly reasonable. "I need to tell you both something," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I've been doing some thinking about the future too." They both looked at me expectantly. "And I've decided that you're right. Things do need to change." Sienna's face lit up with triumph. Marcus looked relieved. "I'm so glad you're seeing reason, Dorothy," Sienna said. "Yes," I agreed. "I'm seeing things very clearly now. Probably more clearly than I have in a long time." I turned and walked back upstairs, leaving them in the kitchen. Behind me, I heard Sienna say to Marcus, "See, I told you she'd come around. By next week, we'll have her signature on everything." In my room, I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding. They had no idea what was coming. Tomorrow, the real estate agent would come while they were at work. Tomorrow, I'd meet with the attorney. Thursday, I'd get my medical evaluation. And then, when everything was in place, when I had all my legal protections arranged and my escape route planned, I would tell them the truth. I wasn't giving them my house. I was selling it out under them. And there was absolutely nothing they could do to stop me. Wednesday morning arrived with deceptive normalcy. The sun rose over Elmwood Drive, casting golden light through the trees that Richard had planted 30 years ago. Birds sang in the backyard. The neighborhood was waking up, people heading to work, living their ordinary lives. But there was nothing ordinary about what was going to happen in my house today. I woke at 6 a.m., unable to sleep any longer despite having tossed and turned most of the night. My mind had been racing with plans, contingencies, and the enormous weight of what I was about to do. I made coffee in my kitchen, I reminded myself, at least for now, and sat at the table watching the sunrise. Marcus came downstairs at 7:15, already dressed for work in a navy suit. He looked tired, stress lines evident around his eyes. "Morning, Mom," he said, pouring himself coffee. "Did you think about what we discussed last night?" "I've thought of little else," I said truthfully. He smiled, looking relieved. "Good. I know this is hard, but it's really for the best. Sienna and I just want to make sure you're taken care of." The lie rolled off his tongue so easily. I wondered if he'd convinced himself it was true, or if he knew exactly what he was doing and simply didn't care. "We'll talk about it tonight, after dinner." "Perfect." He gulped his coffee, grabbed his briefcase, and headed for the door. "Love you, Mom." "Goodbye, Marcus," I said. Not, "I love you too." Just, "Goodbye." He didn't notice. Sienna emerged at 8:30, dressed in an expensive-looking burgundy dress and heels. She'd clearly spent an hour on her hair and makeup. She barely acknowledged me, just grabbed a green smoothie from the refrigerator, one she'd made the night before with my blender and my groceries, and checked her phone. "I have meetings until 4, she announced, not looking up from her screen. "But I'll be back in time to help with dinner. We can all sit down and discuss the paperwork then." "What paperwork?" I asked innocently. She finally looked at me, her eyes sharp. "The power of attorney, Dorothy, and the other documents. Marcus will bring them home from work. It's time to make things official."
"I see," I said calmly. She studied me for a moment, as if trying to detect resistance, then apparently decided I was being compliant enough. "Good. This will all be over soon, and then we can move forward as a family." She left at 8:45. I watched through the window as her sleek Audi, which Marcus's salary was probably barely covering the payments on, pulled out of the driveway. And then I was alone. I had exactly 1 hour before Patricia Morrison, the real estate agent, would arrive. I spent that time doing a final walkthrough of my home, saying goodbye to it in my heart. I stood in the living room where Richard and I had spent countless evenings, where we'd watched Marcus grow from baby to boy to man. I touched the mantle where our wedding photo used to sit before Sienna had removed it. I looked at the spot on the wall where Marcus's height had been marked year after year, marks that had been painted over during a renovation in 2010, but which I could still picture perfectly. I walked into the kitchen where I'd made thousands of meals, where Richard had surprised me with breakfast in bed on our anniversaries, where Marcus had done his homework while I cooked dinner and helped him with math problems. I climbed the stairs Richard had refinished himself, sanding and staining them over a long weekend, and walked down the hallway to the master bedroom. My bedroom, the room they wanted to take from me. I sat on the bed Richard and I had shared for 26 years before his death, the bed I'd slept in alone for 28 years after. I looked at his nightstand, which I'd never moved, never changed. His reading glasses still sat in the drawer. His bookmark still held his place in a Tom Clancy novel he'd never finished. "I'm sorry," I whispered to his memory. "I'm sorry I have to sell our home. I'm sorry our son turned out this way. But I can't let them win, Richard. I can't let them take everything from me." The doorbell rang at exactly 10 a.m. Patricia Morrison was a woman in her early 50s with kind eyes and a professional demeanor. She carried a leather portfolio and wore a blazer that suggested she meant business. "Mrs. Hayes?" She extended her hand. "Patricia Morrison, thank you for calling me." "Please, come in," I said, ushering her inside. "And call me Dorothy." Patricia did a thorough walkthrough of the house, taking notes, snapping photos, asking questions about updates and repairs. She examined the roof, the foundation, the electrical system, the plumbing. She praised the hardwood floors, the solid construction, the well-maintained yard. After 45 minutes, we sat at my dining room table and she opened her portfolio. "Dorothy, I'm going to be straight with you. This house is in excellent condition, and Maplewood Heights is one of the most desirable neighborhoods in Portland right now. Based on recent comparable sales, I believe we could list this property for $695,000 and likely get multiple offers within the first week." My heart raced. That was $20,000 more than Marcus and Sienna's estimate. "How quickly could we move?" I asked. "It depends on several factors," Patricia said carefully. "If you're willing to do a quick close deal and you have somewhere else to go, we could potentially have you closed in 3 to 4 weeks. Are you in a situation where speed is essential?" "Yes," I said. "Very much yes." Patricia nodded slowly. "Dorothy, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've learned to recognize certain situations. You don't have to tell me details if you don't want to, but I'm getting the sense that this isn't just about downsizing." My tears pricked my eyes. "My son and his girlfriend are living here temporarily. They're planning to force me into a senior living facility and take my house. I found documents proving they've been planning this for months." Patricia's expression hardened. "Elder financial abuse. I've seen it before. More times than you'd think." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "We're going to make sure that doesn't happen. Here's what I suggest. We list the house today, Wednesday. I'll do a rush on the photography and marketing materials. By Friday, we'll have it on the market. In this market, with this property, I'd bet my commission that we have offers by Monday." "That fast?" "That fast. And Dorothy, I'm going to recommend you accept an all-cash offer if we get one, even if it's slightly lower than a financed offer. All cash can close in 2 weeks. That means by mid-July, you could have the money in your account and be moved out." "What about the people living here?" I asked. "My son and his girlfriend." Patricia's expression was grim. "In Oregon, if someone is living in your property without a lease agreement and not paying rent, they're considered guests, not tenants. You can ask them to leave at any time. If they refuse, you can file for an eviction based on owner occupancy needs, which is faster than a standard eviction. But honestly, once you tell them the house is sold, they'll leave. They won't have a choice." "They're going to be angry," I said quietly. "Very angry." "I'm sure they will be. But Dorothy, this is your house, your property. You have every legal right to sell it. What they wanted to do to you, that would have been illegal. What you're doing, completely legal and completely justified." I took a deep breath. "Let's do it. List it today." Patricia smiled. "I'll need you to sign some paperwork, and I need to ask, do you have somewhere else to go? Because you should probably plan to stay elsewhere for a while once this goes public." Things could get uncomfortable here.
I have a friend in Beaverton, I said. Margaret Chen. I could stay with her. Good. I'd recommend moving some of your essential belongings and important documents there as soon as possible, just in case. We spent the next hour signing paperwork, discussing strategy, planning the listing. Patricia assured me she'd have professional photos done that afternoon while Marcus and Sienna were at work, and the listing would go live Friday morning. After she left, I called Margaret Chen, my friend of 30 years. Margaret's husband had passed away around the same time as Richard, and we'd supported each other through widowhood. "Dorothy, what's wrong?" Margaret asked immediately, hearing the strain in my voice. "Margaret, I need your help, and I need to tell you something that's going to sound crazy." I told her everything: Marcus moving in with Sienna, the bedroom demand, the documents I'd found, the plan to sell my house out from under them. To her credit, listened without interrupting. "Oh, honey," she said when I finished. "Oh, Dorothy, I'm so sorry. Can I stay with you for a while, maybe starting this weekend? Things are going to get very difficult here." "You can stay as long as you need," Margaret said firmly. "Pack your important things and come Friday evening. We'll get through this together." After hanging up, I called the attorney's office to confirm my 2 p.m. appointment, then spent the next hour carefully packing a suitcase with clothes, documents, and irreplaceable items: photo albums, Richard's watch, my mother's jewelry, important papers. I hid the suitcase in my closet, beneath some old winter coats. At 1:45 p.m., I drove to downtown Portland for my appointment with Catherine Whitmore, the estate planning attorney. Catherine Whitmore was a sharp woman in her 60s with gray hair cut in a sleek bob and eyes that missed nothing. Her office was in a brick building in the Pearl District, tastefully decorated with modern art. "Mrs. Hayes," she said, shaking my hand firmly, "tell me what's going on." I told her the whole story: finding the documents, the plan to force me into senior living, the power of attorney they were going to pressure me to sign. Catherine's expression grew grimmer as I talked. When I finished, she pulled out a legal pad and started making notes. "First things first," she said, "we need to make sure they can't do anything without your consent. I'm going to draft a specific revocation of any and all powers of attorney, effective immediately. This document will state clearly that you have granted no one authority over your medical or financial decisions, and that any document purporting to do so is null and void." "Can they still try to get a court-ordered power of attorney?" I asked. "They can try, but it won't work. You're clearly of sound mind. I can tell that from this conversation alone. But to be extra safe, I recommend you get a cognitive evaluation from your doctor. Once you have documentation that you're mentally competent, any attempt to claim otherwise becomes much harder." "I have an appointment Thursday morning for exactly that." Catherine smiled approvingly. "Smart. Now, let's talk about your will. You said you currently have Marcus as your sole beneficiary?" "Yes. I made that will 28 years ago after my husband died. We need to change that immediately. Who would you like to leave your estate to?" I thought about it. Marcus had made his choice. He'd chosen Sienna and money over his mother. "I'd like to leave it to charity, maybe split between the Alzheimer's Association — Richard's mother died of Alzheimer's — and the local women's shelter." "Excellent choices. I'll draft a new will today. You can come in tomorrow to sign it, and we'll have it properly witnessed and notarized." "There's one more thing," I said. "I'm selling my house. It's going on the market Friday. I found a real estate agent who thinks we'll have offers by early next week." Catherine raised her eyebrows. "You're not wasting any time." "I can't afford to. They were planning to have me sign the power of attorney this week." "When are you going to tell your son?" "After the house sells. Once there's a signed contract and nothing he can do to stop it." Catherine leaned back in her chair. "Dorothy, I have to ask you something, and please don't take this the wrong way. Are you sure you want to do this? Once you sell that house, there's no going back. Your relationship with your son will likely be permanently damaged." I felt tears well up, but I blinked them back. It's already permanently damaged. He's not the son I raised.
The Marcus I knew would never have plotted to steal from his own mother. This person, I don't know who he is anymore. All right, Catherine said gently. Then let's make sure you're protected. I'm going to draft several documents today: the power of attorney revocation, the new will, and a letter of competency that you can present if anyone questions your mental state. I'll also prepare a cease and desist letter that we can send to your son and his girlfriend if they try to harass you after the sale. We spent another hour going over details, signing initial paperwork, discussing strategy. By the time I left Catherine's office, I felt both empowered and heartbroken. I drove home in a daze, my mind churning. When I pulled into the driveway, both Marcus's car and Sienna's Audi were there. They were home early. My heart sank. Had they somehow found out? Had Patricia's photographer shown up and tipped them off? I walked in through the front door, my hands trembling.
I turned and walked upstairs to my bedroom, my legs shaking so badly I could barely climb the stairs. Behind me, I heard Sienna's raised voice and Marcus's quieter responses, but I couldn't make out the words. I locked my bedroom door and sat on my bed, trembling from the adrenaline and emotion. I'd done it. I'd confronted them. But we weren't done yet, not by a long shot. 20 minutes later, I heard footsteps in the hallway, then a knock on my door. "Mom?" Marcus's voice was subdued. "Can we talk? Please?" "We have nothing to say to each other," I called through the door. "Please, just give me 5 minutes, alone, without Sienna." Against my better judgment, I unlocked the door. Marcus stood there looking haggard, his tie loosened, his eyes red from crying. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside and he entered my bedroom, the bedroom he'd wanted to take from me, and sat heavily in my reading chair. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "God, Mom, I'm so sorry. You're right about everything, about all of it." "Are you sorry you did it, or sorry you got caught?" He flinched. "Both. I don't know. I don't know how I got here. When Sienna suggested it, it seemed so logical. You're alone in this big house, and we needed help, and it just made sense that eventually you'd downsize anyway, so why not speed up the timeline? And then one thing led to another, and suddenly we were planning all these details, and it felt less like stealing and more like advanced planning." "Advanced planning for my death," I said flatly. "You were planning your life after me while I'm still alive." I know how terrible that sounds. Sienna kept saying it was practical, that we were being smart, that everyone does estate planning. This wasn't estate planning, Marcus. This was theft. This was you deciding that your wants were more important than my autonomy, my dignity, my right to live in my own home. He put his face in his hands. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I can forgive myself. But Mom, please, don't kick us out. Give us a week to find somewhere to go. Sienna's lease already ended, and my lease doesn't end for another 6 months. If we break it, it'll cost me thousands in penalties." Again, not my problem. I know I have no right to ask, but please, I'm still your son." "Are you?" "Because the son I raised would never have done this to me. That Marcus died somewhere along the way, and I don't know who you are anymore." "I'm still me," he said desperately. "I made terrible choices. I let Sienna convince me of things I never should have considered. But I'm still your son. I'm still the kid you raised, who you helped with homework and drove to baseball practice and put through college. That person is still in here somewhere. Then where has he been for the past 6 weeks? Where was he when Sienna was demanding my bedroom? Where was he when she was researching senior facilities to warehouse me in? Where was he when you were planning to have me declared incompetent?" Marcus had no answer. "You can stay until Sunday," I said finally. 3 days. After that, you need to be gone." "Thank you," he whispered. "Mom, Don't," I interrupted. "Don't say you love me. Don't say you'll make this right.
Just find somewhere else to live and leave me alone." He left my room, closing the door softly behind him. I sat on my bed for a long time, feeling hollow. This was my son, my baby, and I just told him to get out of my life. But what choice did I have? He'd proven he couldn't be trusted. He'd shown me that when given a choice between his mother's well-being and his financial gain, he'd choose money every time. The next 3 days were tense and miserable. Marcus and Sienna barely spoke to me. They spent most of their time in their room or out of the house. I heard them arguing late at night through the walls, Sienna blaming Marcus for screwing everything up, Marcus defending himself weakly. On Thursday morning, I went to Dr. Chen's office for my comprehensive evaluation. She ran me through cognitive tests, physical examinations, memory assessments. At the end of the 3-hour appointment, she signed a detailed letter stating that I was in excellent health for my age, with no signs of cognitive decline or impairment. "Dorothy," she said as I was leaving, "may I ask what this is about? You've never requested this type of evaluation before." "Insurance," I said vaguely. "Just want to have everything documented." She looked like she wanted to ask more questions but respected my privacy. Thursday afternoon, I returned to Catherine Whitmore's office and signed my new will, properly witnessed and notarized. My estate would be split between the Alzheimer's Association and the Women's Shelter. Marcus would get nothing. Friday morning, my house went on the market. Patricia had done an incredible job with the listing. Professional photos made my home look like something from a magazine. The description highlighted all the best features: the hardwood floors Richard had refinished, the updated kitchen, the beautiful backyard, the prime Maplewood Heights location, listed at $695,000. I didn't tell Marcus and Sienna. They were busy packing, making arrangements, dealing with their own crisis. Sienna had apparently found an expensive short-term rental, which Marcus was paying for, adding to his financial stress. Friday evening, after they'd both left, Sienna to her rental, Marcus to stay with a friend, I packed my car with my essential belongings and drove to Margaret's house in Beaverton. "Oh, honey," Margaret said, wrapping me in a hug when I arrived. "How are you holding up?" "I honestly don't know."
Margaret's guest room was cozy and comfortable. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks, despite everything. Saturday and Sunday were quiet. I stayed at Margaret's, monitoring my phone for updates from Patricia. The update came Sunday evening. "Dorothy, it's Patricia. I have news. We have 4 offers on the house." My heart leapt. 4? 4. And one of them is all cash, $720,000, with a 2-week close. They're willing to take the house as is, no inspection contingencies. They're motivated buyers relocating from California. $720,000. $25,000 more than asking. $45,000 more than Marcus and Sienna's estimate. "I want to take it," I said. "I thought you might. I'll draft the acceptance today. We should have everything signed in an escrow by Tuesday." After I hung up, I sat in Margaret's living room, staring at the phone in my hands. It was really happening. My house was sold. And I hadn't told Marcus yet. I called him. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Mom? Marcus, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" He sounded wary. "I sold the house." Silence. Then, "What?" "I sold the house. I accepted an offer today. It closes in 2 weeks." You can't sell the house without telling me. I'm your son. I have a right." "You have no rights to my property, Marcus. I can sell it whenever I want, and I have." "But where will you go? What about your things? What about—" "I'll figure it out. What you need to know is that you have 2 weeks to remove any belongings you still have there. After that, the new owners take possession." "Mom, please, don't do this. We can talk about this. I know I messed up, but this is too extreme."
Too extreme? I felt my anger rising again. You plan to steal my house and have me declared incompetent? And you think me selling my own property is too extreme? That's different. It's not different at all. You made your choices, Marcus. Now I'm making mine. What about my inheritance? His voice had taken on a desperate, grasping quality that made my heart hurt. Your father would have been ashamed of you, I said coldly. And you have no inheritance anymore. I changed my will. Everything goes to charity. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. You disinherited me? Marcus's voice cracked. You disinherited yourself the moment you decided to betray me. Mom! I hung up. My hands were shaking. Margaret, who'd been quietly sitting nearby, came and sat beside me on the couch. That must have been hard, she said gently. It was necessary, I replied, but tears were streaming down my face. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur. I spent my days sorting through belongings in my house, deciding what to keep, what to donate, what to sell. Marcus and Sienna came by twice to collect their remaining items. Both times they didn't speak to me, just loaded boxes into their cars and left. I packed up photo albums, Richard's tools, the furniture I wanted to keep. Everything else would go to an estate sale. The hardest part was saying goodbye to the house itself, walking through empty rooms, remembering all the life that had happened within these walls. Richard proposing to me in the living room, bringing baby Marcus home from the hospital, Marcus's first steps in the hallway, birthday parties and holiday dinners and quiet Sunday mornings. But those memories lived in my heart, not in the walls, and staying here would have meant living under the shadow of my son's betrayal forever. The closing happened on a Wednesday afternoon, July 17th. I sat in the title company office, signed what felt like hundreds of documents, and received a cashier's check for $687,450. The sale price, minus closing costs and realtor fees. $687,450. It felt surreal holding that check. It represented 43 years of my life, all of Richard's work and dreams, every memory we'd made together. But it also represented freedom, independence, the ability to live on my own terms for whatever years I had left. I deposited the check that afternoon, then went apartment hunting. I found a beautiful one-bedroom apartment in the Beaumont, Wilshire neighborhood, in a building designed for active seniors. It had a small balcony, modern appliances, and a community room where residents gathered for activities. It cost $1,800 a month, expensive, but with my Social Security, pension, and the investment income from the house sale, I could easily afford it. The building had a gym, a library, and organized social events. My neighbors were other seniors, many of them widows and widowers like myself, people who understood loss and resilience. I moved in at the end of July. Margaret helped me unpack, hang pictures, make the space feel like home. It was smaller than my house, but it was mine. No one was trying to take it from me. No one was making me feel unwelcome in my own space. I furnished it simply, the furniture I'd kept from the house, some new pieces I bought with my newfound financial freedom. I hung my cross-stitch samplers on the walls. I put Richard's photo on my nightstand. I filled the small bookshelf with my favorite books. It wasn't the house Richard and I had built together, but it was a good home for this new chapter of my life. Marcus tried calling several times in the weeks after the sale. I didn't answer. He left voicemails that ranged from angry to apologetic to desperate.
Mom, please call me back. We need to talk about this. I can't believe you actually did this. Do you understand what you've done to us? Please, Mom, I'm sorry. I know I messed up. Can't we work this out? Sienna left me. She said I was a failure, that I ruined everything. Are you happy now? I wasn't happy, but I wasn't sad about Sienna leaving him either.
Maybe now he'd understand what it felt like to be betrayed by someone you trusted. 3 months after the sale, in late October, Marcus showed up at my apartment building. The doorman called up to ask if I wanted to see him. I almost said no, but something made me agree. He looked terrible. He'd lost weight, and there were dark circles under his eyes. His suit looked rumpled, like he'd slept in it. "Hi, Mom," he said when I opened the door. "Hello, Marcus. Can I come in?" I stepped aside and let him enter. He looked around my small apartment, taking in the familiar furniture and unfamiliar arrangements, the photos on the walls, the cozy space I'd created for myself. "It's nice," he said quietly. "Smaller than the house, but it suits you." We sat in my living room, the silence awkward and heavy between us. Sienna left. She said I was useless to her if I couldn't even manage to secure my inheritance. Said I was a failure. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. Even after everything, I didn't want to see him in pain. "Are you? Because you warned me about her. You tried to tell me, and I wouldn't listen." "You were in love, or you thought you were. Love makes people do foolish things." "It wasn't love," Marcus said bitterly. "I see that now. She wanted money and status, and she thought I could provide it. When I couldn't, she left. Just like that. 3 years together, and she walked away without looking back." "At least you found out before you married her." "I guess." He looked at me, his eyes red-rimmed. "Mom, I came to apologize. Really apologize. Not just say I'm sorry because I got caught. What I did was unforgivable. I betrayed you."